Hi, Mickey from Flipping Spain here. I've promised that we were going to do a deal analysis comparison, so that's what we're going to do in today's video. So now that we've finished our series on assessing the neighborhood, assessing the property, and looking individually at some spreadsheets, I'm going to take 3 different projects and put them side by side so we can decide which is the better option financially. So we're going to look at these 3 properties. I'll just remind you what they are. So the Casco Antiguo is this property. It is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, has these nice balconies in the old town. It has the opportunity to add a second kitchen so that there would be a 1-bedroom to the left facing the street. To the right, there is a 2-bedroom, which has a kitchen that needs to be redone. It has 1 small bedroom and 1 large bedroom. So it can sort of function as 2 separate areas, but it's not really going to be 2 different apartments. So that's this one. It is listed at $99,000. The real estate agent admits that the reason it hasn't sold is because of the price. So I think it could come down quite a bit. 65, I think, would make sense. Now, I've looked at it as a furnished short-term rental. Not really a short-term rental because you cannot get a tourist license for this apartment, which is why the seller is selling it. He planned on doing that, and they changed the laws on him that everything above the first floor has to be a regular rental. But they have this thing here called seasonal rentals, and I'll make a video about the different types of leases and things in the future. But for now, just know that there's this seasonal rental, which is anything less than a year, and there's no rules about the minimum term. It just has to be agreed between landlord and tenant. And the idea is that the person is living in it as their regular residence. They're not on vacation. So you could technically do an Airbnb as a seasonal short-term rental. Airbnbs are outrageous everywhere, and even in Logroño. So I think $1,500 for a 3-bedroom is super reasonable, and I think you could get that for sure. How many months a year? I don't know, but the city is becoming more and more popular, and as other parts of Spain get saturated, I think there's opportunity for digital nomads to come into this area as well. If we were to do long-term monthly rent, I can rent the rooms for $350 each, and then of course, as I said, I could live on one side and just rent the other 2 rooms, but let's look at the full numbers just for the sake of comparison. So when we come down here, we see that if we can get it for that price of $65,000, it's going to cost us about $7,100 to buy with taxes and everything. I'm saying put $25,000 into it, and that means redoing the kitchen, doing some adjustments to the bathrooms just to make them nicer, and then fixing up the flooring. So it's not a ton of work. And then you could put in that little kitchenette, but if we don't do that, that'll be even less. And that brings us to a total investment of $96,500. And so our rent rates are pretty good returns, actually, at 13 and 14%. And it's interesting that there's not a huge difference between a long-term rental and a short-term rental, in which case it's probably just simpler to do a long-term monthly rental to 3 different tenants, and that way you just always have money coming in. And then as a flip, we also looked at it. I asked about subsidies, and maybe you can get a few for the windows and stuff, but they said it's really hard, so we're not going to count on that at all. If you renovated it and did it just as a 3-bed, 2-bath in that area, if it was really nice, then I think you could sell it for $150,000. That's going to give you a profit of just under $30,000 minus tax. We're coming in at $20,000, which is a 22% cash-on-cash return. So it's not huge numbers, but it's still a solid investment. I did look at the option of splitting it into 2 units. If you sold them each for $100,000, you would double your money. If you sold them each for about $80,000, which is on par for the market, then you would make about $50,000. So it's a really interesting option. However, when I asked about what you would have to do, and you have to add another electric box, which means bringing power up from the ground floor. You have to get permission from the city. You have to get permission from all your neighbors. And at the end of the day, it sounds like the hassle of going through all the paperwork and the red tape would take a really long time. So I think the best thing to do, buy it, fix it up just enough to make it a nice rental, rent it, and then you can work on that process over time, and maybe the rules will change and it'll get easier, and then you could resell it, and then it probably would be worth more at that point anyway because the market's going to keep going up here. So that's property number 1. Then we have something totally different, which is just a straight up rental in the center. And that is this apartment here. It's 1 bathroom, 3 bed. It's a decent size and it's listed at $118. So the thing about this property is it's in a fantastic location. The property itself, there's nothing really exciting about it, but it's in good shape. You could do some paint on the walls. All the bedrooms have, even if you kept the furniture, it's like decent rental furniture. I just love that they take such horrible pictures. It does nothing. The kitchen is in really good shape and it's quite large and quite long. It does have 1 single room, but you could get a double bed in there if you took out the big furniture. They're so big on these huge wardrobes. Again, it's not super exciting, but the building itself is lovely on the outside. It has an elevator. It has 2 storage units. It's 1934, so you get a little bit of character, although obviously they've taken all the character out of the inside. So it's listed at $119. If we were able to knock it down and get it for $107, then we're looking at same thing as the other one, maybe a little bit less rent because the bedrooms are all sort of clustered around the living room and you do have 1 single bedroom. So looking at $1,000 to $1,050 if we rent it to 3 different auxiliaries. So with a total purchase price of just over $120,000, looking at about an 8% rent return rate. But that's a cash flow of almost $800 a month. So again, it's not the highest return on your money, but it's definitely better than it's sitting in the bank. And the value of that property is going to keep going up. And you could make some small adjustments over time to make it more appealing and charge a little bit higher rent. Now, the last one is also a flip, and it's one we've looked at before, so I'll just be brief, but I'll remind you what it is. This is the property where it says it's a 3-bedroom, but it's not, and it's across from the construction zone. So again, it's in good shape, but it has no heating and you have to update all the electrical. So there's 2 very big mechanical things you have to do before you can even start thinking about aesthetic things. And that takes up a lot of money. This is also the one that doesn't have a kitchen at all. So you have to do a whole kitchen. We've got to figure out the bedroom configuration. The bathroom's fine as it is. But if you want to make it a really sleek 2-bed, 2-bath, then you're going to lose a bedroom and you probably have to redo that first bath, which is an extra cost that I wouldn't want to take on. But in order to get the whole aesthetic the same, we're going to knock down some walls, make it open concept. I'll throw the floor plan up here to remind you. Again, this is in a fantastic location. So it is listed at any number of prices, the lowest of which is $89,000. So I would want to knock that down to $70 at least. And the more I think about it, I actually think I'd want it to be $60. So I might throw in a cheeky offer of $60,000 just to see if they take it, because it has been sitting there and they're obviously really trying to sell it. Again, this is going to be a straight up rental. So I think if you furnish it really nicely, even without adding a second bath, I think you could get away with charging $850 for the whole thing. That's going to bring in, again, about $700 a month, and it's going to give about an 8% return. Pretty good, all things considered. This as a flip, we looked at that in the other video, and the more I looked at the comps, I'm just not convinced of what you can resell it for at this point in time because there's no elevator and because it's only going to be a 2-bedroom. However, as the demand for housing in the center increases, I think you would be able to sell it down the line. So if we were able to get it for $60,000, and we're going to put a minimum of $40,000 in, and that is the quote I got from an expensive, more high-end contractor, although I think you can get the work done cheaper if you worked with some different people. And I thought you could sell it for $150,000, which would give you a nice, but I don't actually know. Like, there's so much for sale out there. For a 2-bedroom at $129,000, it's probably a safer bet, and that's only a $13,000 profit. Now, it's a $13,000 profit, which I won't take, but if I have these other options that are better. So those are our 3 options, and the nice thing is that they're all viable. They all make money. They're all in budget. Couple of them I'd really have to negotiate to get the price down, but 2 of them have options where you could keep it as a rental and flip it later, which I always like to have multiple exit strategies. So I think the one we would eliminate is this one in the center. There's nothing special about it. It's a straight up rental. If we can buy something else and make that a rental and then have more options for the future, because this one you're not really going to do much to be able to add value. And that I think is my number 1 goal. This one, I think, is in the best location. It has the potential to be really nice. The other units in the building are being renovated. So even though it doesn't have an elevator, I think that outweighs the cons. And I think I would choose this one as my number one option in this analysis. All this to say, this is why your spreadsheets are important, because it really helps you think about what can you pay for the property, what are your exit strategies, what kind of return are you going to get on your investment, and then you can sort of play around with the numbers and tweak them, not to make them work, we don't do that, but just to really say, have I considered all the options for this property? Maybe I could rent it in this way, or maybe I could do this with it. And it just puts it all side by side, makes it super easy for you to make a decision. So I'm going to go prep to make an offer on this one on Avenida Colón, and I'll let you know how it goes. All right, I hope you found that helpful and informative. As always, if you would like a copy of my spreadsheet, or if you have any questions about real estate in Spain or analyzing real estate or even the NowCap program and living in Spain, feel free to leave me a comment and I'll get back to you. Thanks. See you in the next video.